It started like any other day, but things quickly took a turn I never saw coming. I was out running a few errands, minding my own business, when suddenly, a police car pulled up beside me. A female cop stepped out, and her tone was anything but friendly. Without much of a greeting, she demanded, "Give me your ID." Surprised and confused, I asked why. Instead of explaining, her attitude only grew sharper. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so I calmly stood my ground. But that didn't sit well with her. The tension escalated as she repeated her demand, now with a not-so-subtle threat. Or else. Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and I knew I had to stay composed. What happened next was a moment I'll never forget, a test of rights, boundaries, and patience. Stay tuned to see how it all unfolded. As I stood there, trying to keep calm, I couldn't help but wonder what had triggered this confrontation. I wasn't speeding, jaywalking, or causing any kind of disturbance. Yet here I was, facing this stern officer who seemed determined to intimidate me into compliance. Her glare was intense, and her tone carried a weight that made me question if I'd unknowingly done something wrong. "Ma'am, can you tell me why you need my ID?" I asked again, keeping my voice steady but firm. She didn't answer directly, just repeated her demand, now leaning in closer as if to assert dominance. People walking by started to glance our way, some slowing down, sensing the tension. The whole situation felt surreal. My mind raced. Was this a misunderstanding? Or something more? The line between standing up for my rights and avoiding further escalation felt razor thin. I had no idea how this would end. The situation was getting more uncomfortable by the second. Her posture was rigid, and her hand hovered close to her belt, though I hadn't done anything to warrant such behavior. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was testing me, waiting for me to make a wrong move. But why? What could possibly justify this level of aggression for something as simple as refusing to hand over my ID without explanation? Meanwhile, a few bystanders had started to linger, their curiosity piqued by the officer's sharp tone and my calm yet persistent refusal to comply blindly. I could feel their eyes on me, silently judging whether I was right to hold my ground or foolish for pushing back. "Am I being detained?" I asked firmly, trying to shift the power dynamic just a little. She didn't answer right away, instead narrowing her eyes and stepping even closer. The silence between us felt heavy, and I realized this wasn't just about me. It was a test of boundaries, authority, and the limits of what we're willing to accept. The air between us grew heavier, charged with tension as I stood my ground. "Ma'am, I'm asking again, am I being detained, or am I free to go?" I said, making sure to keep my voice steady. She paused for a moment, almost as if she was deciding how far she wanted to take this. Then she stepped closer, her expression unreadable, but her authority practically oozing from every movement. "You're refusing a lawful order," she said flatly, her hand brushing her radio, as though ready to call for backup. My pulse quickened, but I refused to let it show. I couldn't back down now, not when I hadn't been told why I was being stopped in the first place. Around us the crowd had grown, their murmurs creating a low hum of unease. A man with his phone out started recording, his camera aimed at us, capturing every tense second. Her eyes flicked to the camera for a brief moment, then back to me. The crackling of her radio broke the silence as she appeared to weigh her options. I couldn't help but wonder if she would escalate things further or back off under the growing scrutiny. Every second felt like an eternity, and I braced myself for what was coming next. Just as the tension seemed like it couldn't get any thicker, another officer arrived on the scene. This one was older, with a calm demeanor that contrasted sharply with the first officer's aggressive stance. He took in the situation with a quick glance, the crowd, the camera phones, and the palpable unease in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice measured but firm. Before I could respond, the female officer jumped in. "This individual is refusing to provide identification when asked," she said curtly, her tone carrying an edge of frustration. The older officer turned his attention to me, his expression unreadable but far less hostile. "Is that true?" he asked. I nodded and explained calmly, "I haven't been told why I'm being stopped or what law I've broken. I'm just asking for clarification." For a moment, it seemed like the new officer might defuse the situation. But then, instead of addressing me, he pulled the female officer aside. They exchanged hushed words, their body language tense. The crowd watched closely, whispering among themselves. It was clear something wasn't adding up, and the uncertainty only added to the pressure. Whatever was being decided in that private exchange, I had a feeling it would change everything. After a tense few minutes of quiet conversation between the two officers, the female cop returned, her expression unreadable but clearly not pleased. The older officer stepped forward and addressed me directly. "Sir, you're not being detained. You're free to go." Relief washed over me, but I couldn't ignore the lingering sense of unease. "That's it," I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Can I at least know why I was stopped?" The female officer stayed silent, her jaw tight, while the older one hesitated before responding. "There was a report matching your description in the area," he said vaguely, though something about his tone didn't quite sit right. Before I could press further, the female officer abruptly interjected, "We're done here," and turned to walk away. As the officers retreated to their cars, the man recording stepped forward. "You handled that well," he said, offering a quick thumbs up. But just as I was about to leave, someone from the crowd approached me. "Hey," they said cautiously, "I saw them earlier down the street. They didn't stop anyone else." A chill ran down my spine. Why had I been singled out? The resolution left me with more questions than answers, and I knew this wasn't the end of the story. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being targeted for reasons I might never fully understand. The interaction left me questioning the balance between standing up for my rights and navigating authority figures who might misuse their power. I reflected on how easily things could have escalated had I reacted differently, and I was grateful I kept my composure. The man with the camera handed me his contact information, offering to share the footage if I needed it. It felt like a small victory, knowing there were witnesses willing to hold the situation accountable. Still, I wondered about the officer's motives. Was it really a case of mistaken identity, or something else entirely? As I left the scene, I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a reminder for everyone to stay informed about their rights and to handle such moments with patience and strength.